Welcome to Regulatory Ramblings Briefs. Our guest today is Syren Johnstone. He's a veteran transactional lawyer before joining the Faculty of Law, and he's currently a principal lecturer and executive director of the LLM program in Compliance and Regulation. Syren,
Hi, Ajay.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here.
The LLM program's gotten quite a bit of attention regionally since it was launched middle of last decade. When it was launched, it was the first of its kind in Asia. I remember, the marketing folks were keen to point that out to me. While it's not currently the only program of its kind globally, what makes it stand out compared to similar such programs at other prestigious law schools around the world? And it should be noted, HKU is no slouch. I mean, it's long been regarded as the queen of the law schools in East Asia, if not the preeminent law school in Asia writ large.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, is that the program started in 2016. And I think one of the, as you say, it's located within the Faculty of Law at HKU, and that means that we've actually brought into the program a pre-existing pool of resources. And over the years, we've been able to develop the resources that come to the program. But at this particular point in time, I think one of the basic advantages is that we've been doing it longer than anybody else. When a new program of this sort is introduced, as you can imagine, there's a concept of what you want it to be before it's launched. But over a period of an initial years, in reality, programs like this, they're still finding their true shape and form that services the needs of the people that want to come and do a program of this sort. And so we've simply been doing it longer than others. And, the program's really got to a situation now where we are pretty comfortable with the shape of the program, the kinds of needs that it's fulfilling, the persons, both from academic background and also industry backgrounds, who are contributing to the overall flavor of what the program is delivering. So in that sense, being an early starter is a very significant advantage.
We'll get to that later, because you do have an interesting mix of people who are students and people who are professionals. And it's that interesting mix that, I think that there's maybe a premium, there's a value in that people don't necessarily just see if they just look at the price tag.
I actually always feel a bit uncomfortable calling the students on the CR program students, because they're not.
They've already gotten their...
Exactly. They're all postgraduates. In fact, currently the median postgraduate industry experience is 7.x years, which means that most of the people on the program now are either middle management, or if you like, you can call it senior management. They're people who are already well embedded into typically the financial services sector. And they're looking to come and do that program to move up to the next level. So yes, they're students of the program, but they're actually coming in with a particular knowledge set that makes them more than your average student. And one of the, if you like, the burdens or obligations that places on our side in terms of delivering the program.
You've got to raise your game. It's not just an academic exercise.
Exactly, that's right. So we, say unlike an undergraduate program where you may have, let's say, more junior academics teaching certain courses, our teaching staff here are comprised of either academics with an awful lot of experience, 20 years of experience, or around about half of the teaching is actually delivered by people who are coming from the industry. So these are adjunct professors or adjunct of some, whatever their title happens to be. But they're literally coming from a day job where they are a partner in a law firm, a general counsel, a head regulator of some sort, coming in and they're bringing into the classroom their experience, which again is 20 plus years of experience in the industry.
So to what extent is there substantive overlap with HKU's longstanding LLM in corporate and financial law that Paul Lejeau oversees? I mean, that's the respected program. It's been around for a while, I think almost as long as the Asian Institute of International Financial Law. It's respected. What's the interaction? What's the overlap with that program?
Today, I would say almost none. When we, to be honest, when we started the program in 2016, what we saw within the CFL program were students who were looking for something a little bit different. The needs of the marketplace was changing as well. And so, in the early years, what we really did was we had the CFL program and we started to split out two separate programs. And over the years, that split has become very considerable. The benefit of having been in the marketplace since 2016, we've been able to evolve the CR program so it's really quite distinct. One of the important distinctions is the student body. On the CFL program, it tends to be full-time students. On the CR program, it tends to be part-time students. Our student body on the CR program is around about 85% are part-time students, which means that, and it's a tough bunch of people because they're holding down a job and they're coming to do the courses at night time.
I mean, quite a few satisfied customers walked away, just anecdotally from people I've spoken to.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm happy about with the program is the feedback that we're getting from industry. Obviously, that
they learned and they widened their circles, and that was continuing to pay dividends in terms of the doors it was opening for their careers.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things that I think actually works quite well about the program, it's a little bit MBA-like. Okay, so a lot of people go and do MBAs because what they want to do is they want to build the networks. This is what's happening on the CR program. So right now we have around about 400 graduates. Most of them are working in the city of Hong Kong, in typically Central Admiralty, one far, what's it called, Quarry Bay out there. And all of them are very networked together. So I do actually get, for example, some people from the CR program coming back to me and saying, hey, we've got a position available. Can I advertise it to your CR students? And I say, yeah, why? And the reason that they give is because they say, I know exactly what kind of educational exposure they have. It's also interesting because it goes back to the origins of starting the program. So, if I can give you a little spiel about how compliance has evolved, if you go back to the 1990s, it's really a part-time job for accountants and lawyers. There's no such thing as a compliance department. By the time you get through to, say, the 2008 financial crisis, by that time, regulatory fines have become much larger. Post-2008, the amount of regulation that started getting layered onto the financial industry was becoming quite significant. And by this time, compliance was already on the map. But post-2008 and the reforms that followed it, you now had CEOs. I often talk about the CEO's radar screen, small dots and large dots on your radar screen. Compliance was now a significant sized dot on the CEO's radar screen. They wanted to know what that department was doing. They wanted to know who was in it. And it was important to them because of not just the risk of, for example, fines from regulators, but also reputational risk. Large financial institutions, they want to have the reputation of saying, well, we comply. We're doing we're doing the right things with customers' money. We're doing the right thing with how we interact with the marketplace. And as this was happening, in that period prior to 2016, pretty much every week in the financial news, you would see the problem that they were facing was that there's not enough compliance professionals. What is a compliance professional, one might ask at that point in time? As I said earlier, it's part-time job for lawyers, part-time job for accountants, and gradually it was, okay, now the accountant's full-time job is in a compliance department, or the lawyers are now looking after compliance. But over that period of time, you had legal departments and compliance departments splitting out so that a compliance department had equal standing with the legal department. And as that was happening, it was becoming clearer to people running businesses that the persons in a compliance department needed to have certain skill sets and certain perspectives on what their function was within the larger business unit. And so that's really what the CR program was responding to. And so the way that the program has been designed is to give students in the program exposures to elements of compliance that they would not otherwise get exposure to simply by doing their job in the office. So let me give you an example. Somebody might be, let's say, working for a bank. Let's talk about AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, know your client, onboarding requirements. They might be experts in this particular area, but they don't, within their organization, get the opportunity to stand back and get a larger perspective over the organization to see, well, how does this fit into the larger business model? What is it that the CEO's thinking about? Very compartmentalized. And if you're a mid-career professional looking to get ahead, that compartmentalization is actually inhibiting your ability to flourish within, for example, a compliance function. Now, I want to say one thing here very quickly, though. I talk about compliance professionals and compliance functions. Let's not just think that that means people that are in a compliance department. Okay, most of the students that I have on the program, they're not actually in compliance, but they're in parts of a business organization where these days the old saying, compliance from everywhere, is you need to understand it if you're in the front office, you need to understand it in the middle office, you need to understand it in the back office.
Or even quote-unquote quasi-soft compliance or quasi-compliance roles like regulatory affairs, regulatory relations, public affairs type roles like that, where you're going to be schmoozing, you're going to be interacting with the regulators. I mean, this is still valuable knowledge for that.
Well, absolutely. I think, in fact, one of our courses, we particularly talk about that, how to interact with regulators. There used to be this idea that compliance is sort of a reactive job. There's a set of regulations, somebody in business has done something already or wants to do something, and you react to that. That's actually not quite right. First of all, regulations don't just suddenly appear. Usually regulators go through some kind of formal or informal industry consultation. There's always a process where regulators are actually themselves informationally disadvantaged, where there are new market practices evolving, and the regulator needs to understand what it is. So who are they going to talk to about that? That's typically not with the front office person doing the business. So the persons in a strictly speaking compliance function, one of the things they will be doing is interacting with the regulators on a proactive basis, who are thinking about introducing some new requirement, to say, well, yeah, but it's difficult for us to do that. And it's difficult for us to do that and comply with that proposed regulation because X, Y, Z. But on the other hand, your objective as a regulator is ABC. So therefore, if you change that regulation and put it in a way that we can comply, we can actually meet your regulatory objective while also meeting our business objective. So that kind of dialogue proactively is really, really important.
That's a degree of diplomacy in the role that's often overlooked in terms of the interaction.
Yeah, diplomacy is a good word. The other context where that diplomacy and let's say business wisdom kicks in is later in the cycle, when the regulator has spotted something that it thinks may be a problem, and it contacts somebody in that institution. Right there, you've got two different approaches you can take: the good path, the bad path. The bad path is to say, okay, the regulator's making questions. Do they have the legal right to ask me this question? They treat it as a piece of litigation where it's us versus them. This is always a bad path. One, because the regulators have a lot of power. Ultimately, they have the power of keeping or giving you a license. But they have a lot of investigative powers where if they want to find something out, they will find it out eventually. The good path is to see the regulator and your relationship with the regulator as one of trust and confidence. So if you can explain things to the regulator proactively in response to their investigations, keeping in mind that the regulator has a mandate, it has objectives, it's got a legitimate job to do. Right. If you can understand, okay, why is the regulator asking me this? What do they want to know? How can I help them understand my situation or my problem or why this is not a problem? Then you're actually able to de-escalate. And if it is indeed the case that your firm has done something wrong, you can much earlier get to that, okay, mea culpa, we've identified what's been done, we've taken steps to address it, and you're actually bringing the regulator into your problem to say, well, yeah, we care too. And that's a really important skill to appreciate. So, for example, some other stuff in that regard that's important to understand is how do you identify problems before the regulator does? Okay, because if you can do that, and you're thinking about building trust with the regulator, if you can actually proactively say, oh, okay,
this has come to our attention.
This has come to our attention. You don't know it yet, but I'm voluntarily telling you. And by the way, we're already investigating it, and we've got some initial sort of responses to how to contain the problem. It puts the regulator in a position where it maybe develops some trust. You have to remember that the regulator is sitting in a glass and steel building. It can't know everybody in the market and everything that's going on. It's relying on telephone calls, emails, paper that's coming into it. And they're not stupid. And they can very quickly see if somebody's being forthright or if somebody's trying to, sort of bend the truth a little bit, maybe not, omit that particular detail. And so therefore trust is really important. If you can develop that trust with a regulator, when you call up the regulator next time and have a conversation with them, they're going to say, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm talking with one of Syren's students. They're telling me the full detail, so I can trust them. This compliance function is ultimately a business function because it is about we're working in a highly regulated industry. How do we navigate that industry and the various parties and stakeholders in it is a business matter. There's the old joke about compliance being the business prevention department. This is absolutely what I call 20th century thinking. Okay, compliance is not business prevention. It is business facilitation because it's assisting the business units navigate this very complex environment in a way that makes the business more efficient. That means that the CEO, when it looks at its radar screen, says, okay, I've got this big dot here, which is the cost of having so many people employed in compliance and so on. But you know what? That dot enables all of these other dots to grow and prosper.
But that's an enlightened frame of mind. I mean, because the attitude of a lot of bankers is, who are all these people making, in some cases, not insubstantial sums in what is essentially an oversight role? And with tax, they can understand the value of a tax department because you can see how much money they save you. Yeah. With compliance, it's a bit more speculative.
So it touches on another topic, I think, and that is ethics and culture, which cannot be ignored today.
Turn to the top, turn to the middle, yeah, all of that, all those buzzwords that get thrown around
that's right.
that you wonder, we've heard it all before, does it mean anything? I mean,
Well, it does, and yes, there are these buzz phrases, compliance from the top, compliance from the bottom, compliance from everywhere, tone from the top and tone from the bottom. Yeah, they do actually lead somewhere for a firm. When a firm gets into some sort of regulatory hot water, it hampers its business. It then needs to, look, some firms, what they've had to do, the problem is significant enough that they have to go and they're required to employ external consultants who give the organization a health check. One, that's embarrassing. Two, it's very expensive. Three, it's time consuming. Four, and it takes time until you get back to business as usual. That is, HSBC's been subject to a number of these sorts of fines. Goldman Sachs, you name most of the large, household investment banks or banks, and
when they have to bring in external overseers,
yeah, and that's very burdensome. Sometimes the way I like to think about this is that if everybody somehow knew to do the right thing all the time, there would be no laws and no regulations needed, right? But the fact is, it's hard to understand what is the right thing to do in a particular circumstance. And of course, there are bad actors. So we start getting this proliferation of laws and regulations. But it does ultimately come back to a situation where at a very granular level within an organization, individuals need to ask themselves a question, is what I'm doing the right thing to do or not? What am I here to do? Is it to line my pockets with money? Everybody wants to get a proper remuneration for what they're doing, but they also need to put in context their role in a complex regulated environment. And this is where ethics and culture is, it just cannot be ignored these days. And I can tell you from my own experience, I remember in the 1990s going into the offices of Bear Stearns, and I felt like I could smell the fresh blood on the floor of that organization. It's the era of greed is good. Very aggressive institution, and one that is no longer with us. These days, that same kind of culture rarely prospers. I'm sure there are plenty of organizations that are still like that, but it's not the mode of the early 21st century to be like that.
Again, we're not just talking about black letter law. We're talking about war stories. We're talking about things that, I have a master's degree in intellectual property. There are things I learned on the job that I did not learn in school.
Yeah.
So I guess one can say that students in this case learn from the experiences of their peers in this program.
One of the strengths of the program is in fact the composition of the student body. So I can take this in two ways, but one reaction to what you were just saying in terms of academic and what do you learn out of this is the kinds of people that we have teaching different programs. Or different courses rather. And the courses since the beginning of the program compared to now have evolved, and new courses have been added as basically I've identified areas which are going to be of interest to people wanting to come and do the program, and I've been able to pinch from the industry the right person who wants to come and teach it. In terms of the student body, so each year when I look through the applications, it's really a wide range of people. You don't need a law degree. So only around about 15% of our students have law degrees, formal law degrees, or are solicitors or barristers. The rest are not. They come, their undergraduate background is finance, economics, business. I've even had people from a mathematics degree come and join the program. And they've been able to join the program because what I look at together with these other kinds of academic backgrounds is what have they been doing since they've graduated. So for example, the mathematics person that I have in mind, they were basically in risk, doing quant work, right? Which is absolutely compliance related. This is where you get to the tone from everywhere, is that somebody who is doing quantitative research in an investment bank has to be aware of the framework that they're operating within at least some basic level. And if they have a broader view of what the organization as a whole is trying to do and how the different parts relate to each other, it actually helps them do their job correctly. So within the student body then, so I've got these kinds of backgrounds. I've had people from the police force who are, there's a big unit in the police these days, which are looking at commercial crimes, financial fraud, such like ICAC, and of course the regulators. Every year I have people from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Securities and Futures Commission, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And so what you're then looking at is a pretty diverse body of students. And when you come into the classroom and present a particular problem, or you're talking about a particular topic, these people will come at it from different points of view. Now, one of the features of not all, but many or probably most of the courses on the program is we always include coursework. That is group work where it's perhaps 2 students or perhaps 5 students. They need to work together on some problem, and then they need to present it to class. And I've always felt that's a...
You like to do that. I've noticed it across your classes. You like getting people to do presentations.
Yeah, I think it's really important, because the fact is that when you, at some point in your career, you're going to have to stand in a boardroom or stand in front of a client and explain something to the CEO. And most of the coursework I do typically is around you've got about 15 minutes. Okay, maybe you've got a PowerPoint presentation, and that's a skill set in itself. But in one of my classes, I give the students 5 minutes, and they say, "How can I talk about that topic in 5 minutes?" I say, if you're talking to the CEO of a large organization and you've got 5 minutes of your time, you need to learn how to get the message across in that time, and you can. You can do that. It's just asking yourself, who's the audience? What are they here for? What do they need to learn? How much time have I got to explain this to them? So what it means for students in the class, when they're in those small groups, it's okay, I'm a mathematician. They're an accountant. This person's from an economics background, and they actually have to get together and understand each other. Let me tell you one of my experiences when, so I used to be a lawyer in private practice, and then I went over into the world of banking, and one of the first things I noticed was that in the law firm, everybody speaks the same language. We've all had the same kind of training and background. We think analytically the same way. As soon as I was in the banking context, I realized that I'm in a multilingual environment here. I'm talking to an IT guy that speaks IT language. I'm talking to a trader that speaks trader language. And, traders and IT people may find it quite difficult, actually, to communicate. Sometimes they think they're talking, but they're not. And so I think one of the skills that one needs to develop, particularly as you get more senior, is the ability to translate what are the interests of different units within a business organization and how to bring them together so that we get the business of the firm done.
There comes a point in the maturity institution where you want everyone dovetailing towards the same goal, contributing towards a common vision. Otherwise, it's incredibly toxic. And there are banks in this town where it's still, turf wars, silos, fiefdoms, internecine warfare. I'm not going to name names, but yeah, we've all heard the stories.
Well, I mean, it's a reality that institutions are made of individuals, and they come from different backgrounds, different knowledge sets, different aspirations, different objectives as to why they're different personalities. You meet some really nice people. You meet some people that are not so nice, and I think we are in a different collective environment these days compared to, say, the 80s or the 90s, where that
insider trading was legal for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of rawness has had to be dealt with because it winds up profiting the few at the expense of the many. It leads to things like the global financial crisis back in 2008. And so regulators have had to toughen up, and I think institutions have had to respond with a recognition that it's the Friedman doctrine. The Friedman doctrine, Milton Friedman, is basically corporates' primary purpose is to make a profit within the rules of the game. Full stop. That I think personally is so 20th century. I mean, certainly in in certain international markets, the Friedman doctrine is alive and well, but there's a new ethic on the street, and that is that corporates have a social responsibility. And when you're talking about financial firms interacting with markets, it's increasingly obvious that what financial firms need to do when they interact in the marketplace, they need to think about the impact of their actions on the integrity of the market. Because guess what? If they engage in an act which affects the integrity of the market, that's going to be a breach of some regulation or law, and the regulators are going to hit them. As I say, escalating fines make it less desirable to do, escalating reputational costs, because it's not just the regulators, it's what society is expecting from financial firms generally. It's different. 80s and 90s, people expect bankers to be acting in a certain way. They get upset about it, but there's nothing they can do about it. But these days, I think society responds differently. There was an interesting piece of research that was done post-2008, which was looking at society's trust in different industries, pharmaceuticals, airlines. Who do you think fared worst? Financial sector, because it's that whole issue post-2008. Why are those bankers getting large bonuses when the bank is going bankrupt, or I've lost all my money, and they still walk away with a $30 million US bonus? It riled people up to such a point that I think banks that wish to be surviving institutions are now looking at this saying, we can't do that to society. We've got a different role in society in the 21st century. And we think about all these other topics, sustainable finance, ESG, being socially responsible. It's all connected with that, or it's interwoven with these concerns that we're all in a society. Financial firms play a role in the well-being of that society. And these are very large-scale topics, but you can bring those large-scale topics down to the actions of individual people within a particular context. And understanding, let's bring it back to compliance and regulation for a moment, understanding whether you're a CEO, whether you're in the legal department, whether you're in a particular business unit, understanding how to get a person to behave in an appropriate way that's consistent with not only social expectations, but also with the needs of the business. The business is there, it needs to make money, it needs to do deals, it needs to take risk. How do you get people to act in that way? That's the really big challenge. You can't just write it in a compliance manual. You need to get people doing things.
My own sense has always been that you can't necessarily teach ethical behavior, but you can inculcate the values that lead to ethical behavior.
Well, I think you can make people aware of ethical problems. The group think is a classic one. Okay, you've got the new kid on the trading desk, and the traders say, put in this or that trade, and they say, but you can't do that because you've got an outstanding client order, and you should put the client order in before you put in ours. Don't worry about it, kid. That's the way we do it here. And now you've got that junior person who's in a situation where they know what they're supposed to be doing, but they're faced with their seniors who have been traders for the last X years, thinking, am I going to buck the trend here? Am I going to be the odd person out? Okay, fine. If they say it's okay, it must be okay. And then this is the slippery slope where they get dragged into that kind of behavior, and it is very, very difficult for people within an organization to actually stand up and say, well, I'm not going to do that. Because in some organizations, that's going to be curtailing their career. So it puts them in difficult situations.
Something unique about the LLM CR program, and it's unique not just amongst LLM programs at HKU or elsewhere in the territory, is that it's received fellowship funding from the government. So what does it take to be a CR fellow?
The government introduced this funding program. I knew there was a competitive application from all the universities in Hong Kong. And so the compliance and regulation program now have had it for 3 years, and we will be getting it in the next year as well. So we're unique in the law faculty in that regard. And what the funding is really about is the government wants to focus on courses that have interdisciplinary learning that promote priority areas for Hong Kong's development. And so I'm happy that the CR programs come to their attention. So this is one of the ways that they're trying to promote priority areas. So what happens here is that this is available to students who apply and get enrolled in the program. The amount of money they get back on their fees currently is $120,000. So that's a good chunk of the fee that they get effectively reimbursed. It's only available to local students. Okay, so an exchange student, for example, couldn't apply for it. But we get about 60 to 65 students in the program each year, and of that, typically around about, say, don't quote me, but 45, 50 actually qualify. So we go through a process of having them apply with a proposal. We interview them. We've had about 9 or 10 fellows each year. And one of the things the fellows do is they propose a special project, and they work together with the other fellows. So we've now got 3 cohorts of fellows, and soon we'll have 4. And so we've now got a few generations of fellows. And one of the things that they've done, and I want to emphasize, they are doing it. They're doing it to create something that goes beyond simply getting some money back in their pocket. And so what they've created is something called the Compliance and Regulation Fellowship Association. And within that association, what they do is they do special projects. So they can propose anything. I kind of guide them as to what might be good or not.
With the aim of?
With the aim of giving back to society and actually fulfilling that idea of developing something important in the city or in Hong Kong. So let me give you a couple of examples. One is they've started a mentoring program. Okay, now, so bear in mind that the fellows are one might say, the very best of the CR intake each year. Some don't apply, some don't qualify, but they're very, very good students. They have a lot of experience in I think the post-graduation average or median for the fellows is more like about 9.x years. And what they're now doing is they're doing mentoring programs with the undergraduate students here who are, that is in the law school, who are thinking, you know what, maybe I don't want to go through the difficult process of doing a traineeship in a law firm and being a junior associate, which is a lot more difficult these days than in past years. And they're looking at it saying, well, I'm going to take my law degree and maybe I'm going to find a different direction in my career other than as a solicitor. So what the mentoring is, it allows them to talk to somebody who's been in this sector for many years to say, hey, what's it like? How should I go about looking for work? What should I do or say or not say, perhaps in an interview? So, that's a really good initiative. They're doing some other things, which is one of them, which is underway, is something we're provisionally calling Knowledge Street, and that is to do a series of very short podcasts which are directed at what I call the Mrs. Chan of Mong Kok, who may have interactions with brokers or be thinking about investing in a fund, but has no university degree, possibly hasn't finished the high school, but has some money to invest and wants to know what should she expect, what are her rights.
Street level knowledge.
Street level knowledge, hence Knowledge Street. So they put that together. So the fellows get together, they work with each other, they kind of think out the box a bit, and that gives them interaction with each other. It means that they can build something that goes beyond, and then they become fellows. So what we're planning to do, it's early stages at the moment, is we're planning to build out this CRFA, Compliance Regulation Fellowship Association, so we have effectively different levels of members. So senior fellows who have come through the program as fellows, and other students who may want to join to contribute. And ultimately what this will be, it will be a combination of a large-scale networking of people who have come through the program. And it'll be a significant community outreach where people in the community who are nothing to do with the university, they can actually come back here as a body of knowledge and learn stuff that's relevant to them.
Your entering class size and your typical student profile for the program, I think you alluded to the typical student profile somewhat, but anything you want to share about that in terms of stats, age, figures?
No, as I said, to briefly summarize, one doesn't need a law degree. One of the things that I introduced must be about 4 or 5 years ago now, was a non-credit bearing course for non-lawyers, so that before you start, it runs at the beginning of
the
each
law
year.
for dummies or something.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's about 6 half days, and it's a crash course in thinking like a lawyer, how to write, how to analyze like a lawyer, relationships of different courts, how to read case law and such like. And in fact, it's been so successful that typically most of the people who have taken the law degree actually go and do that and report that it's been quite useful.
So a typical classroom experience, how much of it is, say, lecture, versus breaking them up into groups, exams, written assignments? What's the break?
Well, different courses have take different approaches, and I think that's important because different students do have different expectations. There are students who would prefer to sit in a class of 100 and be lectured at for 3 hours. They prefer that. And there are other students who prefer a smaller class experience where they get to interact with other students, with the lecturer, that they want to stand up, they want to give a presentation. So that there's actually a blend, but there's really very few courses anymore which is just 100% exam, 100% lecture. The exams are always a take-home exam. Depends on the course, but typically a couple of weeks. So it's like a research essay that one does as the exam. Most courses are not 100% that. Most courses will have some component where, say, coursework might be worth a quarter or a third of the total mark. There might be a participation, 10%, 15% for actually engaging in the class. One of the things that I always emphasize in my classes is that when we're in the room, this is a learning environment. We can all learn from each other. And so let's not assume that I'm here to tell you everything you need to know. That's not what my role is as a lecturer. My role as a lecturer, I think, is to bring them forward on a collective learning journey where they interact and make mistakes and say, hey, what about that? Why can't we do things that way? Yeah, let's explore that.
What struck me about the program is if you wanted to say, I'm going to undertake this program, I'm going to bone up on everything compliance related to the insurance sector because that's where I see myself going after graduation. You could do that because of the number of electives that you've got. So have there been instances where students have been able to use the degree to transition into a niche within the compliance world that they sought out?
Well, I think there's been many cases of people actually coming through the program and then reporting
using it as
me.
a springboard to get into the kind of role that they want.
Yeah. I remember one student who was a pretty senior executive at a household name investment bank, and equipped with the learnings that she'd taken from the program, and we do cover technology quite a bit. That individual had decided to leap over into the crypto industry. And they didn't leap over into a compliance role, but with the knowledge that they have the compliance challenges that the crypto industry faces, that individual was able to take on a business development role to develop a new business within that particular crypto player.
It's clear that you can't talk about regulatory compliance, risk management, or governance in the modern age in the financial sector without also talking about fintech, regtech, crypto, DeFi, NFTs, and the like. So they do get exposure to that in
definitely. So as I say, over the over the years that the program has been running, I've been able to add courses to the program. So we have a larger suite of courses now than what we did in 2016. And typically, it's either a new course being added or a particular course, the contents of the course being adjusted over time. So, one of my courses is it's a part 2 course. So you have to do something in the first semester, then you move over to the second semester. And in that second semester course, it's completely different now from a few years ago, because what I've done is to say, okay, we'll say sustainable finance, right? We've chatted extremely briefly about that. It is such a big topic now that we need to distribute clear messages as to what sustainable finance and ESG is and what it isn't and what the issues are, so that players in the financial services sector aren't greenwashed. Oh, that sounds great. That's a sustainable finance product. That must be good. Maybe not, if you look at the details. So this has been a really big issue. It's not just sustainable finance per se, but how do you understand when finance is or is not actually sustainable finance or promotes some ESG or SDG, Sustainable Development Goals objectives. So I talk about that. Whereas, say, 5 years ago, maybe mention it, but now I devote pretty much a lecture and a half to that topic because it is so topically important and sensitive, and I don't think there's any banks out there that exist of any size that aren't thinking about what sustainable finance means for their business. So topics like this, and of course technology, data and privacy, of course, is one that's been on the books here since the program began. But again, we've been developing that because of the increasing awareness and sensitivity about technology.
In the time we've got left, during the pandemic, the program went online. Now it's still the case, and then things improved, and people started attending classes on campus, which is the ideal learning mode, I would say. Most people would agree. But there are still prestigious LLM programs around the world that, in this space, that still offer the online option, and students are basically watching videotape classes with students sitting in class or the separate sections for the online crowd. And that's typically to address the logistical issues that arise from illness, disability, distance, or people being unable to obtain visas. Any chance that this program might go that route? Because I can imagine you probably double your takers if you...
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is we're interested in quality rather than quantity. Yeah, we could take a lot of people into the program if we went online, but the experience, because of the timing.
Plus the high cost of living in Hong Kong. I mean.
Well, yeah, but it is ultimately about what we're trying to deliver as an institution to society, and we're trying to. There's a branding. There's a branding with HKU. There's a branding with the law. There's a branding with the law faculty. There's a branding with this program, and it's really important. If we go back to the fundamentals of why this program started, is because industry needs people who have a broader perspective on what compliance is, and the much larger understanding of not just what's happening in Hong Kong, but what's happening in different markets and how this is impacting on how a financial institution goes about its business. Okay, that's what they're needing. They're not wanting people with bits of paper that says, I've got a degree. Okay, now...
though the imprimatur of an HKU degree counts for a lot in this world.
Well, one thing is the degree, another thing is the knowledge that you get in the degree, and then the knowledge and the experience of doing it. So coming back to the online versus face-to-face, we were actually, because of the particular timing of COVID, the law faculty was one of the first law faculties in the world that had to go online. So we started fairly early, and we had a lot of learnings how to do online teaching better. It was an uphill battle, because suddenly, I mean, we're not experts in doing online learning, and suddenly, boom, you've got to get onto Zoom and figure out how that works, and so it was difficult. And I think that by the time that we got through, let's say, to the second semester, or certainly the second year, online learning was a lot better. We were familiar with the format. Students were getting used to it in terms of how to interact online, put up your hand or unmute yourself. But net, nobody liked online learning experiences.
Because it's not the same.
And I can tell you, when we went back to face-to-face, I have to say, it was the joy of being in a classroom with students, and it's my joy and it's the students' joy of being with each other in that same space. The quality of interaction is just completely and utterly different.
That's
it
what people
means
tell
that
me.
it's real time. It's certainly not anything recorded, but it means that you can read people's faces. As a lecturer, I can read people's faces in response to what I'm talking about. I can spot the people who are following or are not following, the points in time to pause and go back over something, the points in time to ask that student up there. So you seem to be thinking about something, what's on your mind? You can't do that online, or it's really difficult to do.
Last question. If you were to sum it up, what would you tell a prospective student in terms of what they would walk away if they were to undertake this program, and also your own background? How does it impact the tone and the tenor of what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn?
Well, prospective students, if they want to walk away, I would say the first thing they need to do is to walk forward and make the application. Too many students leave the application until very, very late in the process, and we accept applications on a rolling basis, and if we see a good application in December, we'll start that process of getting an offer out early to that good application. And so it doesn't require too much figuring to say, well, if there's about 60 to 65 places available, it's a competitive process. We get about 300 applications each year. So it's not a bad idea to be at the beginning of that list rather than at the end of that list. Yeah. So apply early. So it doesn't mean that people at the end of the list are not going to get in. There's different kinds of students who apply at different points in time. The point is to do it. What do you walk away with? I think the ability to get out of your cubicle in whatever you're doing right now and whatever you've studied before, and to sort of pop your head up and to look at different parts of the organization and get the perspective of what does the CEO think about when they're thinking about how to run the organization in a manner, in a context where it's a very highly regulated environment. Hey, why should I care about what's happening with the EU taxonomy on greenhouse, concerning climate change and greenhouse gases and so on? Hey, why do I care about a particular piece of case law in the United States about the latest, crypto asset problem, FTX and Ripple and Kraken? Why does that affect us here? Look, when we sit in Hong Kong as an international finance center, the way that our business practices are shaped is influenced by things happening in Europe, things happening in the United States, of course, things happening in mainland China, the many connects that we now have. All of this, this is sometimes what I refer to as the tectonic plates. You know, there's these large, slow movements which are unstoppable. And I think one of to come back to the key question, what do you come out with? You come out with an understanding not just of, hey, what's the law on this, what's the regulation on this, what does a compliance person do? No, you come out with this much larger perspective on how the world is changing, why it's changing, and why it matters to how I'm going to do my job in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. And I think this is really you know, a fundamental difference, say, between certain kinds of colleges which you come out and you know a whole lot of stuff, but next year you're a little bit out of date. Yeah, in this program, the idea is you walk out of that program, and the perspectives that you get will run with you for 5 or 10 years, because you're looking at it not just today, you're looking at the shape of the future.
Sounds like a worthwhile investment. Syren Johnstone, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Ajay. Been a pleasure.
And to our viewers and listeners, thank you. Until next time.